Ascent Podcast.
Hey everyone, Matthew here. Before we begin today's show, I just want to remind everyone of this month's sponsor, Whale Street. Whale Street is the DeFi engine that powers NFT economics on a massive scale. They make huge currency swaps happen, or whale swaps as they're called, with very small slippage costs and without crashing the system. They also engineered the largest ever NFT bundle and fractionalized it into the historic B20 tokens. Whale Street is all about upside, so dip into the liquidity pools for rich rewards. For B20, join discord.com/whale. That's discord.com/WHALE. And follow Whale Street on Twitter @WhaleStreetOFFL. Thank you and enjoy the show.
Okay, Mike Casey, welcome to the Matthew and Rizzle Show.
Hey, Matthew. It's great to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, sorry Rizzle couldn't be here today. He's really bummed that he had to miss this, but children, life, things happen sometimes. But I'm really curious to get into your background and get to know you a little bit more. So if you can, give us a little introduction about yourself, who you are, what you do today, and then take us on a little creative journey from when you started making music up until now.
Sure. So I'm 27. I've been playing the saxophone most of my life, going on 18 years now, which feels like a really long time. It's been the main constant in my life, I guess, at this point. I'm a artist, songwriter, producer, saxophonist. Jazz is my home, but I love to leave the house. I do a little bit of everything musically. And I've released a few albums. In 2020, I put out my studio debut album and visual album, Law of Attraction, which was a really great experience and a very interesting journey, to say the least, from the nexus of that album all the way through the actual release of it, which has gone very well and also was kind of, a little bit different in a lot of ways. Music videos and visuals are not necessarily that common in jazz, in the format at least. So it was really fun to really bring fans right into the music and to show them just how raw that album was. And I've always been really inspired by visual art. I used to draw when I was younger, and my dad draws a little bit, and I've done a few multimedia things over the years. So, the evolution into NFTs for me is kind of natural. It's something I've been looking to do for quite a while, to find different ways to engage with the visual arts and other formats beyond just the typical music formats. So I'm really excited to dive into that space, and been a fan of cryptocurrency for quite a while as well. So it's really incredible to see the growth of crypto in general, and especially what it's been doing for artists in the last year, 18 months or so. I love to see it, and I'm very excited.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm surprised, but not surprised at how, like, being in the NFT space, I'm being introduced and meeting all these folks with varied backgrounds, from artists to now jazz musicians, movies, actors. Like, again, surprised but not surprised, because this technology is something that anyone can get their hands on and utilize. But before we get into talking about the NFT side of things, I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit about the new album that you have coming up. And yeah, I think that's probably going to be the perfect segue to NFTs.
Sure. So Law of Attraction actually was released in October. It's still very new, by all means. And I'm actually releasing remixes of the album currently. The second remix actually came out today. So I'm keeping the story going by releasing remixes, and I also have some unreleased cuts from the session that'll come out at the end of the year. But it's been quite the journey. This is common in music. Sometimes you write a song and it sits there for 6 years, and then you finally record it, and then it comes out 2 years later. Some of that is definitely the case with this Law of Attraction album. Other songs on it were written a month before the recording, but it was recorded in 2018. It was kind of a thrown together effort, because I was actually about to go overseas for a year for a year-long master's degree program at the Berklee College of Music. They have a new campus in Valencia, Spain, a lot of people might know their main campus is in Boston, but they've been opening campuses around the world. So I was just about to leave for that, and I was feeling really good about where my band was at the time, and I was scrambling, really, to be honest, to throw together this recording session to document all these songs that we'd been, touring for a few years. And it just kind of came together that we were going to record in this studio in Bushwick, Brooklyn. The thing is, I didn't realize until I got there at the studio that the studio was barely a studio. It says that if folks go check out the video, the visual album Element, which is on YouTube, and also the Vivo app on your smart TV, you can watch the entirety of the album. You'll see that we're actually missing several of the staples of a recording studio, in that we don't even have headphones, we don't have monitors, there's no isolation. It's like really bare bones. So it's really just three of us, and then in a couple songs there's a fourth musician just playing in a room, and there's no tricks, there's no mask, there's no nonsense. It's just a bunch of musicians creating in the moment, facing each other. There's no isolation. So in the mix that you hear at the end, there's a ton of bleed in the sound, which is really organic and natural, and there's no way to like fix mistakes, really. So it's a very raw session, which I love, because I think that that's actually the power of jazz music, is that we are one of the few genres that has heavily relied on improvisation. And specifically with jazz, you are supposed to embrace mistakes. You are supposed to take chances. You are supposed to take risks. Sadly, over time, I think the last 20 years, that has become quite diminished in the music. A lot of jazz today plays it safe, and I think that's actually part of why the popularity has declined over the last couple decades, is because a lot of it doesn't really take chances quite that much. A lot of people are kind of catering to radio, catering to people that want to play jazz in the background, people that don't really want to grab the audience and shake their head and say, listen to this, I'm demanding you listen to this. I'm saying something through my saxophone or my piano or my bass or whatever your instrument is. Even though there's no words, every line is a statement, it's a sentence. That's really the spirit that this music comes from, and that's what I try to bring through in my music. So the way this was recorded in every way was kind of, almost nothing, almost the whole session didn't happen almost. The piano wasn't even in tune when we showed up. It was just, everything was like against all odds. And then I sat on the music for about one and a half years, because it actually took quite a bit of work to get the music mixed and mastered, because there was so much bleed in the mics that I went through like 2.5 engineers that actually gave up. They're like, I can't make this work. It was recorded too poorly.
Wow.
But I finally got an engineer who was like really down to to make it happen and put a ton of work in. And his name is Hugh Harsher. He's in Berlin. I love him to death for putting the work in on this album. So we got the record, finally mixed and mastered, released it, 2.5 years later in October 2020. And against all odds, without a record label, it's on its way to passing 2 million streams. It was in Spotify's Best Jazz of 2020. You've got in the Huffington Post, a lot of press, a lot of radio. And one thing I'm proud of is that it got featured not just within the jazz scene and the jazz realm, but beyond it as well, because that's not that common in jazz. And it's not easy to get people who aren't familiar with jazz to give it a chance, and then to, really listen to it and dig it. And that's something that I put a lot of effort into, is trying to bring new folks into the space, into our world, as the world of jazz, because it can be a little off-putting sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, well, I feel like most people just simply don't have a reference point, or if they do, it's like Kenny G, maybe, right? Which is, at least you yourself, you're 27, you're really close to my age. Like, our generation, I don't really think a lot of people look at Kenny G as like the bastion of cool or anything like that. Although people in music for sure respect the F out of him, right? I think Kanye's incorporated him into a couple of his songs, but it's just we're lacking that reference point for jazz. I'm thinking probably more along the lines of Coltrane or something like that. But most people outside of like the jazz space, or if you haven't played like a woodwind instrument, you're probably not like super familiar with that sound. So it's super cool that you're bringing this back to the forefront and it's gaining traction. But before we move forward, I kind of want to dive into like the act of improvisation musically, because it's something that's been so interesting to me for a long time. I started out younger playing the saxophone and alto saxophone.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, like I played up until I was a senior in high school. Was trained by a jazz musician, started working on improvisation, but something I never just, at the point where I guess I could have departed and gone deeper down that rabbit hole, I left and stopped playing and I literally went to Asia. But I'm curious if you could walk me through the mindset of like when you're improvising, like what is it akin to like speaking a foreign language? You're just so used to sounds and you're kind of letting it flow with your fingers on the saxophone. Walk me through
That's
that.
a great question. It's a little bit hard to sum up because it's so vast and so deep. But I will say that to kind of be somewhat brief, I try to explain it to folks in the sense that like I actually don't like the word improvisation that much because sometimes, and I'm not saying you do this at all. Actually, I don't think I don't think you mean this the way you just described it at all. But sometimes people think of the word improvise and they think random, and they think that it just happened like magic. And then because they think of it in that space, they don't think of it as something serious or deliberate. Right. And what I mean is that I really think a better description for what is commonly called improvisation within music and especially within jazz is actually spontaneous composition. We are writing. Every solo you play is delivered with the seriousness, with the intent, with the detail of an actual composition of a song, but you're just doing it on the fly in real time in an interactive way with other people, and all of that without an eraser. And that's actually the goal, and it's also like the practice and the real time habit of it, because when you're so-called improvising, you do want there to be a message, you want there to be some type of journey, you want there to be a statement, and to do that you have to think of it kind of like, okay, where am I taking this? How does this idea connect to this idea? And it's not that different from how you write a song. Each part of the song is supposed to support other parts of the song, and they're supposed to connect in different ways and interface with each other. And improvisation is the same way. Cohesive improvisation is the same way. So I like to think of it a lot more like composing, songwriting, but you're just doing it really quickly, like instantly, with no eraser. So you do have to train for that. But at the same time, the end goal is kind of like, it's kind of like you almost want people to hear it, and if they didn't know it was improvised, for them to not think that it was improvised. Like when I hear the masters at the highest level play, sometimes I think to myself, wow, if I didn't know this was improvised, I would just think it was written because it's that good, If that makes any sense.
100%. I love that spontaneous composition. And I mean, I'm coming at it from like a linguistic perspective, and it almost reminds me even just that expression, like spontaneous conversation.
Yes.
Because it seems to me that listening is a huge part of the improv, right? Not just what you're doing and how you can bring your part full circle, but what everyone else is playing with, making sure it sounds tight and, like you said, cohesive with what everyone else has been putting out there. That's so interesting, man.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. And it is a conversation. You're absolutely right. I mean, that's the biggest thing is that, you could see my band or pretty much any jazz band worth their salt. You could see them 7 times in a row, and it should be a different show every time. And especially if you switch the band members around, it's going to be completely different, because even though I've been with my trio, for example, for probably 8 years now, going on 9, and we do have a lot of chemistry, and we do know how to anticipate each other and almost finish each other's sentences in a certain sense. we
So,
also have
yeah.
developed musical trust where, we all three of us are comfortable kind of pulling the rug out from under each other and then like seeing what happens and like letting each other fall and then catching each other. It's almost like trust falls, but like musically sort of. And there's that dynamic happening all the time too, where we're all taking chances with each other because we've become comfortable doing that. So it never really gets old. But it allows it to be strong. But at the same time, sometimes one of them can't make it to a gig and I have a sub, and that brings a whole nother level of excitement because I have a sense as to how someone will respond to something I play, and they probably have a sense as to how I might respond to something they play because, you do study from a certain tradition. You grow up learning a lot of the same songs. You listen to the same records. There's some similarities in the pedagogy and how you learn that, technically speaking, I could fly to Japan and show up and meet a bunch of jazz musicians and we can all play together without meeting each other or even speaking English to each other because there is a culture and there is a musical language there. But you still, when you don't know the person, there's that personality element that you don't know that you're kind of flying blind. And that can be great sometimes not so great, but who's playing with you really matters a lot too.
100%.
Yeah.
And well, I kind of want to get back to law of attraction because, like you said, since you released it, you've been kind of putting out remixes, and then coming up, it's not a remix. You're pushing out, you're releasing law of attraction as a full album NFT, I believe, on OpenSea. Is that right?
So the NFT collection is a few different things. But where were you going with that first? Something about the law of attraction title itself, or
Just what you're doing with the album on OpenSea in terms of releasing it. Yeah.
Yes. So on OpenSea, I'm really grateful for their support. We're doing like a front page banner collaboration, and the collection is actually it's multidimensional. I have a few things in there that are one of one. I have a few things in there that are like a limited number of pressing. I'm not sure of the exact term, but I have music videos in there. I have new animations that I made based on the album artwork. I also have the album artwork itself, which I designed. I actually design most of, if not all, almost all of my discography's album artwork I've designed myself. There's one thing where I had to basically get someone with Photoshop to help me finish it, but I more or less designed it. They just did the Photoshop part. But that was before I discovered Canva. I do most of my stuff in Canva now.
Canva is amazing.
Canva is amazing. It's really crazy. Shout out to Canva. But I'm also doing, this is one thing I'm really excited about. Every time I do an album, I go through probably, anywhere from 5 to 20 drafts of different album artwork ideas in Canva. And then I decide on something. And I'm actually releasing the unreleased album art as NFTs as part of this collection, so that people can kind of see, the evolution of the album art to what it was in its final form, and also giving my fans a chance to see, oh yeah, this is kind of interesting, like how he started with this idea and then it said, no, that's not going to be it, but here it is. I could still check it out, So I'm excited to bring that element to it. And a few of the items have unlockable benefits like signed CDs that I'll mail to folks, or, 30-minute Skype lesson or hang, where we talk about music, or I can show you stuff on the saxophone or the piano or music production or songwriting or whatever it is. So I'm trying to make it, a living, breathing thing, and something that has both elements from the existing album, as far as songs and music videos, but also new animations and this unreleased album artwork element too.
Like the way that you've structured this, it's not like it itself is not a performance as such, but it feels like it has a lot of the elements that you'd kind of want to package together with like a full-bodied release of something just in one particular drop. I'm trying to think like like how did you, or what's the reason behind putting everything together in this release as opposed to kind of just tokenizing the audio and layering on like an image or something like that?
Well, that's a good question. I I do have some of that in here in these, album art animations that I built, but I wanted to do that because I think that it's a cool thing that is kind of unique in the NFT space that people seem to like it, and I think it's cool. Like Blau it did that, and also that kind of thing has been a part of the YouTube music culture for probably a decade now, where all these YouTube music channels have their own like animation style for the album artwork, so that it's not just a static image. I've always thought that was really interesting. So I did want to do some of that, but I also wanted to try and be creative with it and see what I could do to add my own style to the conversation and make it something unique. And I just felt, I have these album artwork files and I just never used. I never posted them really. I never shared them with anyone. Why not try this out and see what we can do with it? See if people like it or find it interesting. I have no idea if they will, but I just figured why not?
It's a great experiment to run, and the one thing that I've always kind of associated with NFTs is stories, right?
Yeah.
And it feels like there's a lot of stories that you're telling with this drop, with this release, that may have, stories that previously probably just remained with you, or just maybe a small circle of folks who were aware of like your process and the work that you were kind of scheming up and creating and deliberating on before deciding on like the album covers and stuff like that, in addition to the music videos and stuff. So I think that's really, really interesting. And then
absolutely.
Oh, keep going. Sorry.
I was going to say, the story part is really, it's really, that's the biggest part actually, I think, is that, looking at these album artworks, I'm actually like, I'm looking at them now just to refresh my own memory. You could kind of see how I started with the heart on something else, and then I morphed the heart over time and kind of incorporated the sound. I don't know if you can tell in the album artwork or if you've seen it, but it's a heart with a waveform, like a vibration, like a sound wave, sine wave, inside the heart. And, these unreleased album artworks kind of show the development of it into the final one. And the reason I actually designed that in the first place was basically inspired by this concept of heart math with the law of attraction, which for those listening who don't know is kind of the universal idea that we are in charge of our destinies to an extent or entirely, depending on how deep you go into it, and that your thoughts becomes things and you attract your reality, and that's done through the vibrations of the universe. And part of that actually connects to this concept called heart math that I really have been trying to study and learn about and incorporate and, just get better at in my own life for a while, where there's basically some science that measures the vibrations of the heart with how it affects your whole body, your mind, what happens to you. And there's a whole institute actually set up for that called the Heart Math Institute. So it was kind of this album title and the album artwork is all connected to that stuff. And I've been a long time believer in that. And I've always felt that musicians really deal with these things, whether they consciously believe in it or not, because when we create, especially if you're creating in the moment with people, you're basically throwing your vibrations at the other musicians. They're throwing them back at you. You're collectively throwing that at the audience. They're throwing it back to you, and we're all kind of connected in that way. And when you really tap into it, you start to consciously feel it and play with it and learn how to develop it and control it, or just at least participate in it. It really kind of is mind blowing, and it really affects a lot. It affects quite a bit. So it's been a driving force in my life for a while. So that's kind of the story with the album title and the artwork, and you'll kind of see it through these images as they develop too.
I always take notes during these conversations, and I had never come across or heard of heart math up until now. That's a fascinating concept, and I'm definitely going to dive down that rabbit hole after we stop recording this.
Yeah, it really is. I need to look into it more myself. And, I've actually been meaning to try and like get some of the gear they have and like run some tests on myself and see if I can like improve, because the law of attraction, it's one of those things where it's such a double-edged sword. I mean, it goes both ways. Like we all have those inevitable like dark thoughts or dark times. And, if you're not careful, like at least for myself, like I notice very, very deliberately if I'm really focused and honing in on the power within that all of us have, I've been able to manifest a lot of things for myself in a lot of situations, a lot of outcomes and various things. But the thing is, like, inevitably we all have those darker thoughts, and thankfully those have not manifested quite as often as the better things in life. But, you know, it's one of those things that I'm trying to really improve on and just keep an eye out for, because apparently, you know, I think to myself, well, if I've been able to get all these good things to happen, or good outcomes, good vibes, good situations, you know, I just wonder if, like, oh crap, when I'm thinking about the bad stuff, is that on the way? You know, and then you start to, like, really, then it starts to spiral, and that's not good either. So it's such a double-edged sword that I'm always trying to improve there, basically.
Yeah. And well, I mean, I guess I don't know if you want to call it like saving grace, or just the thing that would probably limit some of the negativity being like something that you attract if you're in that like negative headspace or in those down moments, is that, I mean, if you're not putting that out into the world outside of like your own mind, like if you're not posting on social media, if you're not tokenizing something in that frame of mind, maybe it won't come back, or maybe there's a limit. And maybe that's also part of the reason why you're, I mean, putting music out like this, tokenizing things, like somehow that helps amplify that positive heart math that's going on inside, or getting broadcast out to the universe or whatever. That's so interesting. But like going from here, right? So we have the drop that's upcoming. What's the plan after that? Are you just going to kind of monitor like that experiment, how it plays out, and then play it by ear heading forward?
Yeah, well, I mean, a little bit, but I do have other plans for other drops. I have other ideas for other drops. You know, I've been thinking about this stuff for a while, actually, since, well, this wasn't the first time, but I don't know if you know about the Wu-Tang Clan's experiment, probably 10 years ago now. Was it that long? I don't know if do you know about this, the one of one album they did?
With that terrible person that bought it or whatever. I forget what his last name is. Skrecky or something. Skrekly or Svrelky. I didn't want to say his last name because I can't pronounce it.
Yeah, Martin. Yeah. Yeah. It was very unfortunate that he ended up with the album. And then I think the government ended up with the album because he went to jail.
That's right.
What a trip.
Yeah.
So weird. I mean, that whole thing. And actually, I think Lil Wayne, he has a Lil Wayne album too. Lil Wayne had like a similar thing where Lil Wayne had like one of the Carter albums that was unreleased, and he needed some money, so he sold it to him. And then he, like, shortly after that, he went to jail. So I think the government also has this Lil Wayne album. I'm not 100% sure, but it's such a super crazy story. But, you know, ever since that happened, I've been thinking about the same thing, in that, like, you know, I've always thought of like art as kind of a continuum and kind of a thing that just flows. And I have so many ideas, big ideas for projects in art, as do so many artists. And some of it is almost like, you know, if I was to take every idea I have for my art and like put it in the same kind of, not saying I do this now, but every musical artist is beholden to this in some way. What I'm getting at is like the music industry machine type of release schedule, where you're only supposed to put out so much music so quickly or so slowly, depending on how you look at it, for whatever is perceived as the best outcome for your development or maximum impact on sales or whatever it is. And all of that is like a kind of an abstract conversation that changes artist to artist, level they're at. Do they have, you know, investment from a label? All sorts of things are involved in, like, when does something come out? How long do you wait before putting out the next thing, and how do you do it, right? And, you know, every artist is concerned with these things because they impact our own survival, right? But what I'm getting at is if I basically, like, you know, I'm starting to realize, as someone who creates a lot of art and releases it, by all accounts, for jazz today very quickly, like, if I basically put my entire artistic output forever into this mold, and I'm always worried about like not releasing too much, I'm starting to realize that, okay, I'm going to release way less art over my whole life than I want to. and I'll never get to a significant amount of ideas that I have for projects, albums, collaborations, you name it. So I'm starting to think of like, well, if I could like not worry about that by way of having someone, maybe it ends up being a one of one album that some, patron pays a lot for. Is that so bad that like, I get the art out that I want to make, even if it's just to one person? I'm not having to worry about whether I can, recoup the cost that I spent to make the art, because making music is kind of expensive. You have to, especially if you're in a band setting. It's not like I'm not like a producer in my bedroom by myself, right? Like I have a bunch of people to hire and a finite time in the studio. So it's something that you do have to kind of balance as an artist. How much you spend on making, are you going to ever make it back? Because you got to pay your rent. So all that to say, it's like I'm thinking about NFTs as like, maybe this is a way where I could make more art that I want to make, take more risks, and have it be subsidized and have it be special, even if it's just special for one person at a time. Is that so bad? Is that the way? Maybe that's the way to like experiment and make more things happen,
Totally. And it feels like, this is an early experiment, right? So you still need to flesh a lot of things out. But I think to your point, the big potential with this experiment is that you're going to be able to uncover potentially some big, huge supporters of yours, right? That previously have all fallen under a single label as a fan. And it's hard to tell which fans have purchased your work, have paid to go see you like live perform or anything like that. Like it's all been just this singular, unified, big blob fan. But now with NFTs, you're able to start to kind of uncover like, okay, maybe I have a couple whales that are my fans that, like you said, maybe they want to fund a new album that only you'll deliver to them in like an unlockable NFT or something. Or you're able to uncover all the other folks who are, maybe they don't have the wherewithal to purchase a one of one album, but they want to support what you're doing by paying for whatever you're able to put out there. And anyone that collects these NFTs, they become not trackable, but you just become connected, and you can stay connected with those fans, and vice versa if you're a fan or collector with the artist or musician that you purchased from. So I feel like those threads right now, they're going to be very faint. They're very thin because of the early experimentation, but over time they'll become thicker, more, I guess, stronger, and you can pull on them to do more interesting things that probably we can't even think of right now. Probably harnessing the power of that collector base, but we're probably getting a little ahead of ourselves talking about that already.
Well, that's the thing is I actually don't think that it's that far off. I think, it existed back when the Wu-Tang Clan tried it 10 years ago, and it exists now, and it's just like in the very early stages for music. But I think that this kind of idea, you're right. I mean, the music industry has a lot of issues with it. One of those is the fact that like, for some reason, we all agreed that, a song is worth 99 cents, and that a stream is worth, a third of a penny or less sometimes. And it's like, well, what if there's like a million notes in my song, and what if my song is 20 minutes long and it has like an orchestra or whatever it is, or what if my song cost X to make and someone else just made it on their phone? Mm-hmm. So there's all these things that it gets for certain genres of music where, by the time you're 27, you've put in almost 20 years studying, right? For example, and you play an instrument that is, I'm not saying a saxophone costs what it costs to own a cello or a bass or something like that, but, a saxophone is not a cheap instrument compared to like a drum machine or, something. Right? Like there, different types of music have different costs associated with them, and the current model actually puts a lot of stress on, musicians that play in bands. I would say especially on those in the jazz and classical forms, and there's all sorts of things along those lines that just make it quite difficult to actually function in this modern day. in some ways, because we just have certain processes and expenses to what we do that others don't. So it's harder for us to kind of keep up in some ways. So, I think that having this extra layer where if someone really loves what you do or the genre that you do, and they want to help and they want to be part of the process, I think crowdfunding and NFTs and Patreon and all these types of things are amazing, and they're really great, and I think they're very necessary for the arts to continue to thrive and grow, and for artists to thrive and grow, because it's it's not easy. It's not easy at all, and I think that those fans who really support artists are like angels, really. I mean, it's incredible. It really helps quite a bit.
100%. And well, I want to be respectful of your time, and I just want to make sure that we should get this information out there, because we're going to be listening to this live tomorrow, Wednesday, in the Token Smart Discord. So let the folks know when your drop is going to be released on OpenSea, any other details that they need to be aware of, where they can follow you, all that good stuff.
All that good stuff. Yes, indeed. So the drop on OpenSea is April 19th, this coming Monday. I'm not 100% sure exactly what time it's going on, but it should be on the front page of the website via a banner. So keep an eye out for that. I believe it'll be on their socials as well. My website is mikecaseyjazz.com. That's Casey spelled Casey. So MikeCaseyJazz.com. From there, there's links to all my socials. The best way, though, to stay in touch, honestly, is the email newsletter, just because social media, it gets a little tough with algorithms sometimes. But I'm on all the socials. I'm really excited to do this drop and to share, some behind the scenes things with folks as part of the Law of Attraction collection. Also, somewhat related, as I mentioned, there's a couple of remixes out. There will be more remixes. Those are actually largely self-produced. I'm a producer as well. So that part is just me in my laptop in my room by myself, reimagining these tracks, which is a lot of fun. But I'm actually doing a behind the scenes kind of virtual program, I should say, based on the album on April 21st with Pittsburgh Arts Center City of Asylum, where I'm going to be talking more about the Law of Attraction album and stories behind the album and, showing in-studio videos of the album. So if you want to, and that's free for anyone to RSVP. If you want to learn about that, it's on the shows page of my website, April 21st, 2 days after the NFT drop. So for those looking to learn even more about the album, definitely tune in for that. It's just an hour at 7:00 New York time. So really excited for that next week as well.
That's awesome. Really looking forward to, especially that on the 21st. I want to kind of get more insight into this, but of course the 19th, the drop. Excited to see what happens here. And just want to thank you for taking the time to speak with me, and keep on creating, Mike.
Absolutely. Matthew, thank you so much for having me, man. I love what you guys are building, and this podcast is great. So seriously, thanks for having me. It's an honor and pleasure. And thank you all for listening. I hope to say hello in person one day to everyone out there, and hope our paths cross again in the future.
Boom. There we go. Okay, let me stop.
Hey everyone, Matthew here. Thank you for listening to today's show. I just want to remind everyone of this month's sponsor, Whale Street. Whale Street is the DeFi engine that powers NFT economics on a massive scale. They make huge currency swaps happen, or whale swaps as they're called, with very small slippage costs and without crashing the system. They also engineered the largest ever NFT bundle and fractionalized it into the historic B20 tokens. Whale Street is all about upside, so dip into the liquidity pools for rich rewards. For B20, join discord.com/whale. That's discord.com/WHALE. And follow Whale Street on Twitter @WhaleStreetOFFL. Thank you, and see you next episode.
Podcast. podcast. Let 'em know, y'all. Thanks.